From Singapore, we'll hear from Mr. Jeremy Tan, Chief Executive Officer of Liquid Group. I'd love to pass it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. As Stephen mentioned, my presentation is very basically what's happening on the ground. When we looked at this forum, and we were deciding what would be most relevant for us to present, and we wanted to just share this thing that we're so excitedly that we've done together with our airport, together with our tourism industry, and together with a lot of, as Stephen has mentioned, we are a cross-border firm. We love, obviously, the tourism industry. I think, like everyone here, the last 12, 16 months has been a really interesting experience for all of us. But of course, in that environment, we have put together certain platforms that we think are working with stakeholders in the industry to think, when things are opening, it's not gonna be the same. It's not gonna, it would be very tentative. It's not gonna be a blanket opening. So there are certain things that we obviously need to cater and do our best in terms of trying to manage when different economies starts to commingle. What can we do to ensure that when tourism starts, it's not a false start, it wouldn't reverse. So a lot of thinking went into this. So it distilled down into a very practical implementation that we work with our airport in Singapore. And we're just so excited to give this opportunity just to do a show and tell. So as Stephen mentioned, it's quite a different format as the rest of the presenters. But we're happy to just run through this. So if you could, Kevin, if you could jump to the next slide. Well, the next slide again. Just a little bit on us in terms of what we do. We are a private company. We've been in payments for many years. Not so sure whether this history is entirely relevant in this slide, but just to give a bit of background, just to frame us in terms of why we're talking about this. We predominantly in payment. We went from online to digital online to physical to now digital. But more importantly, what we wanted to convey is we are operating in multiple Asia Pacific countries. We are, only incorporated in 4, but we linked to about 13 countries to allow cross-border payments. And so when we try to create something coherent to allow, how travelers will pay and why and how in a safe way, this is something that we speak on behalf of also all our partners across the region, because we're essentially implementing the same thing. So if we go to the next slide. And this is the reaction to COVID. Okay, so this is one thing that I think most of us would have heard or have advised or advisory in terms of do use contactless payments. And most markets, contactless means the tap, which is basically using the card or the phone and you tap. And the idea behind it is quite straightforward. Obviously, you want to minimize exchange of cash and coins. And contactless payments and not card payments is, we're trying to limit the exchange of cards. So as we look through the whole spectrum of the different countries, certain countries are more paranoid and certain countries are less so. And in terms of the exchange of cards, obviously with the banks playing a big role, saying no cards would be a very dangerous proposition. So obviously contactless is one, but there's also a contactless proposition for QR, which it can operate in 1 meters apart. So in the most extreme environment, QR payments, you don't even have to tap it. It's not about waving a phone or a card. You can scan a QR. It's literally 1 meter apart. You can scan it behind a barrier, a transparent barrier. And that was one of the imperatives of why a lot of adoptions around frontline retailers and we've I think the total network have about 2.1 million retailers on our partnership network. And when they speak to the retailers, some of them, in markets that handled the situation a lot better, they were less worried, and some, let's just say, they were a little bit more worried. So what we have, a good in between is ensuring that we have the flexibility and the tools to support contactless payments, whether it's tap NFC, which is a little bit pricier, is a little bit tighter in terms of the nearness, of terms of the transaction. The nearest in terms of proximity that they have, all the way down to QR. And this slide that you will see is all about QR. It's 1 meter apart. And research has also shown that this has also risen. I've, obviously extracted Visas and Juniper's research on this. Digital payments is rising, cash and coins is going down. It's been a big boom, not to sound too happy on that one, but the truth of the matter is cash and coins drastically has gone down around the regions. I think as the metrics come along, people will be more, the impact will be more and more obvious. But conversely, I think from the real numbers as we see from financial services statistics, contactless payments have literally been very, very significant in this project, this period. So the contactless payments that we will address is QR, and not to downplay the fact that contactless tap is a major component to that, but we focus on the QR, partially because to also accommodate the 1 meter proximity that we need to be able to transact, and not just having to tap or swipe it. So the next slide, if we could, Kevin. Thank you. So I mean, this is in a very strange way. I'm just presenting in a very straightforward how this happens. So QR, I think most of us will be familiar if we look at QR from China. I think most of us have always heard of Alipay, we've heard of WeChat. But this is something that we would like to point out as well, is that most of the national governments have some form of QR payments. If not QR on a national framework, at least there have been multiple fintech wallets that has gone around the market. So, some have gone extremely big, some have obviously died off, but there is still a whole healthy a group of QR players that serve the market pretty well. I think those in Southeast Asia will be familiar with Grab or Go. I think in North Asia, there's PayPay, and a whole splattering of different QR players. So in that sense, Changi Airport being a hub and a good transit point for a lot of the different travelers, obviously had to work on a solution that could accommodate as many of the different diverse, regional, and even global, I would say, wallet players. So what they did, or what we did together with them, was to put together a platform that could literally take everybody together. So it's a little bit flippant to just say put everybody together, but it took a lot of effort than most would realize. But effectively, from national schemes to individual large wallets, they created a hub that basically accommodates wallets from Indonesia, from Malaysia, from Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, Philippines, Hong Kong, Taiwan, China, South Korea, Japan. There are some countries that haven't announced yet, but let's just say in the Middle East, as well as in the South Asia and Latam. So in that sense, it is, I would call it global, but it's making a good impact in terms of coverage. And that market base itself, it's basically QR. If people who are unfamiliar, it's just a little thing that you scan and the phone magically redirects you and takes it off. It's secure, as proven by the large scale usage in China and a lot of national wallets being on it. And it's contactless. So in response to COVID and why we're doing it, so we've taken a couple of steps. First, we identified that QR is one, identified the players around the market. We got everybody together, put them all into one platform. And we took advantage of the lull in travel and make sure everybody from airport down and from downtown to airport, we're slowly moving it off to ensuring that everybody knows how to use it. It's a lot easier to train as we expected because Singapore is well penetrated by Ali and WeChat. So the retailers were ready. There were subsidies obviously thrown in for adoption, making it cheaper, but obviously those are more temporal. We expect that to go off. But in a sense, it's a concerted multi-industry effort to first offer options to the retailers. I think as we go into policy planning, sometimes the guy, the last mile frontline worker is the one that makes or breaks how the implementation goes. So while we're trying, or I won't speak for them, but let's just say as markets open, certain markets to prevent and to avoid certain friction when people start catering for tourists in an industry, as I repeated many times that we love, We want to create platforms to make them feel safe. And so that whole endeavor, that whole entire project has kicked off. And we have converted a fair base in preparation for opening. And opening is as elusive as ever. But just to say that as a matter of time, as a matter of fact, Changi is ready. So this is, if we could hop to the next slide. So in that, just doing payments, by sheer talking about payments, that wasn't enough, because to give them extra boost in terms of when the opening happens, combining the fact that with now a safe, efficient way of paying, there was a move towards, and this is something that I'm very sensitive in terms of explaining this too much, because there is also a big entire push towards how you're going to market with COVID. Obviously, let's just say that the traditional players, the big, there has been a reshuffling of that in terms of who's around anymore. So obviously, as the market opens, there is a big push to basically reintroduce the digital, the tourist assets to tourism, the tourists. So in that sense, how do we do that? How is that going to be managed? How is Singapore going to basically tell every incoming tourist, what's great and who's ready and who's prepared and what's the latest thing to go to? So obviously we needed to market it. We need to throw in terms of how to incentivize, it's a combination of marketing plus incentive. So they bundled it all together. They killed off the concept of the digital, the payment voucher. It doesn't exist anymore. You don't want to carry little papers to tell you that first you have to distribute it, then you have to send it. First you have to manufacture it, print it, distribute it, and after that you have the more critical part is that they will be exchanged for discounts, you have to be exchanged at the point of sale, which is something that they were definitely against. So bundled together with that, they digitized vouchers. So in that sense, working again with people on the ground, creating a streamlined version to allow retailers to market onto the platform to tourists, but more importantly, during the time of transaction, when they are paying, all the discounts, all the variables in terms of rebates are all bundled in together. There will be no explanation, because first addressing a lot of problems at the same time, because imagine giving a voucher and a person who is visiting is of a different culture or language background, there might be disagreements, there might be disputes. They automated the whole thing. Put everything together so that when you scan it, the system tells you, okay, you've entitled to discounts, it's been applied in your language, and it's done. In that sense, minimizing exchange of the physical voucher, and also minimizing potential disputes along the way. So I thought that was pretty smart, and putting it together. There's one slight thing that they've done as well, which allows, they also digitize the receipts. So this is one of those things, no more exchange of the thermal paper, in a way going green, but be very, very practical. The main driver of this is to avoid and prevent the exchange of receipts. And so it's a three-pronged thing: prevent the exchange of cash, coins, and cards, prevent the exchange of physical promotion materials, and preventing the physical exchange of receipts. So this is all three things. I actually had a little voucher demo. I don't know whether it's appropriate. It's really very, very down to the ground. But if you do, I can always circle back to this. But that's my presentation. It's just a little thing in the midst of all the opening and the big plans and policy that everybody is doing, just to put our little voice in to say that we've been working with retailers, and one of the retailers that we want to mention was Changi, and planning is ahead as we wait for the policymakers and everyone to decide when the opening is, and to see everybody face to face again. So if we jump to the next slide, Kevin. That's it. Have any questions? Happy to take them. I'm happy to even run through the video if you think that's appropriate. But else, that's my presentation. Stephen, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Mr. Tan. It's a very interesting case study that you've got there. I think one of the interesting points that I might ask you a little bit more about is, given that you're talking about the area of Changi Airport, it's basically like an airport mix with a shopping centre. So it includes an awful lot of very small businesses, and we might call them micro businesses as well. I'm wondering how they have all adapted to taking up this new type of technology, and whether you had any difficulties or issues in getting that sort of buy-in across them.
Short answer is no, but it's more nuanced than that. So what I'll say is this: it is you are right. Changi is a whole entire ecosystem on its own. So from a retail to F&B, you have your fast food to your luxury stores, from the really branded big retailers to as a support of our local businesses, you have your small micro SMEs, all the way down to, if you look at it, food canteens. We have multiple canteens within Changi that services their own staff, as well as tourists. Tourists, strangely, for a little experience of the local food in Singapore, do go to our canteens and so on. So I would say that the micro businesses is actually a lot more open, I would say, than we expected. But there's always the holdouts, the people who say, and to be fair, I think sometimes it has to be mindful in terms of when we introduce a technology platform, some businesses will just not adopt it. It's just a fear of technology, and it's quite understandable fear. It takes time. So I would not say that those who were not receptive was specifically to this platform. It's just specific to any change. With the Changi itself, to their credit, does provide a good supportive environment, and we do have support from our government agencies to try to educate, to try to allay any concerns in terms of any changes. I think we've hammered down the whole narrative about digitalization, the need to change, but there's always that last mile, the hard work, like I said, the pavement pounding. So the small businesses, we tend to be able to convert them reasonably easily. It's easier than expected, but those who don't, there are definite difficulties for I won't call them stubborn, but there will be definitely those, and we should we mitigate around that. It's not their fault, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.